most mental health assessments go through the GP. And unfortunately, GPs have so little time that they do not have the time to screen for mental illness by default.
Let's dip into mental health a little bit then, Emilia. So this is obviously a subject which inspired you to build a business and a product. So, so what do you think about how mental health is being diagnosed at the moment? And obviously maybe we can go extrapolate that out globally, but I think in the UK, let's just use that as a case study. How effective is the current diagnosis for mental health conditions, and how much room for improvement is there?
Yeah, it's quite grim, actually, unfortunately.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Yeah, it is pretty grim. And the unfortunate situation is, in the UK, let's say, as a particular example,
Sure.
most mental health assessments go through the GP. And unfortunately, GPs have so little time. They only have 10 minutes with each person, maybe 5 in some cases, that they do not have the time to screen for mental illness by default. You only get screened with questions if you come with a complaint. So there automatically you're excluding a load of people who don't know they have a condition or don't want to talk about it, etc. So there's so many people falling through the cracks. When you do get screened, unfortunately, at that GP level, fewer than 50% of cases are diagnosed accurately. So you're getting off to a really bad start.
Yeah.
If you're not even being kind of assessed for the right type of mental illness. So about 50% of cases, less, like it's worse than chance level, they get it right. When they do think that you have an issue, you're then kind of sent to a specialist. And the waiting time then is horrific. It depends on the condition. But say for depression, you could be waiting 6 to 12 months to see someone. For ADHD, the current waiting list, I think in the NHS, is 5 years for an ADHD diagnosis.
That's crazy, isn't it?
So you can imagine, like, if you had a tool that worked at the GP level, basically just screen by default and get it right 90% of the time, that's a massive improvement in and of itself. But that's kind of the situation right now in terms of diagnosis. And really, again, they just have questions. And I think there's a lot of talk about access to mental health care. So people not seeing a clinician, not having access to a clinician, that's a massive deal. People don't talk about so much the types of people who get access. There's so many people who get overlooked if you're just relying on questions. Children aren't able to answer questions very well. Older, confused patients can't answer questions very well. And there's so many people who are nonverbal, say like severely autistic people, they can't express themselves. So if they have mental health comorbidities there, or if there's something happening, they fall through the cracks in the system even more.
So what is Plan B then? I mean, obviously, if we are diagnosing people's mental health conditions and propensity to have or to be susceptible to mental health conditions, or trying to diagnose things like ADHD or autism, are we just completely relying on conversational answers to questions? We're not. Do you know what I mean? There's no other diagnosis at all.
So for mood disorders, so for things like anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, personality disorder, bipolar, yes, it's entirely questions based. ADHD and autism is a little bit different. You get to do some more cognitive functioning tests, but it takes 7 to 8 hours to diagnose someone with ADHD. Can you imagine having ADHD, having to sit for 8 hours to do a session? That's also wrong. That's also problematic in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So why have they got reservations with AI and gamification for this purpose then? Because it doesn't sound like there is any other way to try and, the current system clearly isn't working. Why are they not engaging with people like yourself, companies like yours?
I think it's just bureaucracy, to be honest. The way the NHS is structured and how small companies can engage with them is so flawed on so many levels that it's so problematic. We have partners we work with in Brazil, in the US, in Africa, in Indonesia, Spain, Greece, Italy, they all embrace it so much more easily than the NHS does. Like in
Wow.
Africa, they're like, wow, you can help us fill a gap where we don't actually have
Yeah.
specialist clinicians, and we're,
This
we're
this
taking
this
it on.
makes this makes so much sense to
It
me
does.
because
And
I
it's
mean the
cheap,
current
it's
status because
effective.
yeah because the
Yeah.
status quo
Mm.
is clearly not fit for purpose. Clearly, it's not.
Yeah.
We're going to be laughing, not laughing. We'd be horrified, but we're probably going to look back at this in 10 years and think,
Yeah.
what on earth were we thinking? Diagnosing this by listening to people's answers to just basically you get diagnosed whatever the patient tells you, not
Yes.
what we've actually measured. Do you know what I mean? So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's crazy, isn't it? Really
I'm.
bizarre.
Yeah, it is. I think it all comes down to just the way it's structured. So bureaucracy, fragmented system, and just I don't know. I don't know whether it's poor management or whether it's also um, kind of a reservation in terms of how the UK is now regulating AI as well. That's kind of another thing that's going to become even more of a problem. But it certainly is not welcoming to new technology. I've
Mm,
spoken to quite a few companies who decided instead of going private or going global, they wanted to target the NHS.
yeah,
And more often than not, they've actually lost out and they spent too many resources and it didn't work out for them. So when you hear that as a startup, you try to get into the NHS, you see these same patterns, you're like, well, I don't want the company to go under with me trying to do the right thing. I'd rather we survive, we do an amazing job elsewhere and eventually get into the NHS, but it means it's going to take us a long time to get around to it,
yeah.
which is problematic. Like it's we're helping people abroad, we should be helping them here as well. Like the NHS should be accepting this kind of technology a lot more easily and readily than they are.